Michael Harrow woke to the kind of silence that did not belong in a $10 million villa. It was too still, too pure. No sound from the sea below the cliffs. No murmur of morning staff preparing breakfast. No low thrum from the security monitors in the hallway. Even the air felt heavier, like it knew something before he did. He pushed back the silk sheets and sat up. The marble floor was cold under his feet. Limassol's early sun spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warm gold slicing through the sterile white of the bedroom. Normally, he would have reached for his phone on the nightstand and scanned through notifications from his assistants, fund managers, or his wife. Instead, he reached for nothing. The phone was gone. Michael Harrow stood slowly, tension building in the pit of his stomach. He walked barefoot across the hallway. The villa was open-plan, minimalistic, modern, but now it felt too open, empty. There was no trace of the usual staff, no familiar scent of espresso or incense. The place smelled like granite and bleach. "Clara!" he called out. His voice echoed off the marble. No answer. He moved to the living room. The curtains had not been drawn. His briefcase was missing from the coffee table. The TV was off. The home automation panel was dead, unresponsive. When he tried to turn it on, it blinked once, then nothing. He tapped it again. Still dead. He exhaled, already pulling together a list of problems to be solved, numbers to dial, people to fire. Then he saw it. A single sheet of thick white paper, laid carefully on the glass desk in his office. No envelope, no seal, just a sentence, written in a clean, deliberate hand. "You took something that wasn't yours. Now we balance the books." His blood chilled, not with fear, yet, but with the kind of recognition a man feels when he's finally caught up to a truth he's tried to outrun. He grabbed the desk phone, dead tone. He opened his laptop, no Wi-Fi. He checked the internal modem, disabled. Michael Harrow moved faster now, into the second guest room, his backup office. Secondary laptop, burner phones, all gone. He sprinted to the bedroom, pulled open the walk-in safe hidden behind the closet wall. His emergency passport was there, but no cash, no black card, no flash drive. Even the watch box was empty, his Patek Philippe collection wiped clean. Michael Harrow clenched his jaw, breathing hard. His hands shook. He stormed downstairs past the pool to the private garage. The Range Rover was still there, but the Mercedes S600, his preferred car for low-profile travel, was missing. He pressed the remote key fob. Nothing responded. He cursed under his breath, popped the driver's door, checked the glove box. The car's GPS had been physically removed. He grabbed the emergency mobile he kept hidden in the tire compartment, the one with no SIM, only used for tethering into external networks via proxy. He powered it up. 5 bars. At least one thing worked. Michael Harrow ran back inside and connected it to his spare tablet. The signal took a moment. He accessed the secure banking app first. His offshore accounts in the Caymans, British Virgin Islands, Zurich, and 2 in Cyprus. Each login process felt like a countdown. The app flickered with each second. His pulse thumped. Account 1, 0010. Account 2, 000. He typed faster. Account 3, 000. No, 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 he whispered. Account 4, 00. He stabbed at the screen for the final login. Account 5, 0.0. The app closed itself, locked out, his credentials revoked, his hands curled into fists. All 5 accounts wiped, not frozen, not audited, zeroed. Michael Harrow had once said, in a private boardroom meeting in Manhattan, that the true measure of power was liquidity, not assets, not property, access, movement, freedom of funds. That was real power, and now he had none. He tried the emergency line to his lawyer in New York, disconnected. He called his London-based trustee, no signal. He called Clara again, still nothing. He sat in the middle of the living room, breathing, thinking, not panicking, not yet. He stood up and walked back to the note. He stared at the handwriting. There was no signature, no date, just the quiet elegance of deliberate vengeance. You took something that wasn't yours. Now we balance the books. Michael Harrow read it again and again. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone who knew where to hit, who knew how his empire was built. Someone who had access to his most guarded vaults, offshore entities that had never been documented, shell corporations layered behind 5 layers of ownership and law firms. Someone who knew how to dismantle him from the inside out. And now that someone had flipped the switch, Michael Harrow was not a man who begged. He was not a man who pleaded. But in that moment, standing alone in a villa that had been stripped of its purpose, with all of Cyprus burning bright beyond the windows, he realized the unthinkable. He was not in control. Not anymore. Michael Harrow had always prided himself on redundancy, fail-safes stacked like Russian dolls. But as he moved through his systems one by one, all that remained was the unmistakable sound of digital dead ends. Every login returned to 0. Every failover account had been scrubbed. He had been erased with surgical precision. He drove the Range Rover down the coast, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses, his mind not on the road but backtracking years of transactions, betrayals, and acquisitions. The morning sun was blinding off the asphalt. He wasn't just looking for a mistake, he was looking for a thread. One missed stitch in the weave that hadn't been pulled. He parked in front of a nameless stone building in an industrial corner of Limassol. Inside was a man known only to a few, Constantine, a broker of last resorts. They hadn't spoken in years, but Michael knew Constantine respected only one thing: power, and Michael Harrow, even in this state, still carried the scent of it. Constantine didn't ask questions. He didn't blink at Michael's sudden reappearance or the sweat on his brow. He opened a single terminal running on a satellite line. Michael keyed in a pattern that hadn't been used in 6 years. The screen came to life. One account flickered on the display: Zurich, registered to a ghost company called Orion Invest, a shallow shell used in the mid-2000s for a venture he'd buried so deep it surprised even him to see the name. Balance, 5,014.29. Michael exhaled slowly. Enough for a flight, a room, a phone, just enough to start digging. He thanked Constantine, no words exchanged. They both knew this favor would not be recorded, but not forgotten. Hours later, Michael sat in the last row of an economy-class flight to Geneva. The plastic seat groaned under him. He couldn't remember the last time he had flown commercial. Maybe 2004, maybe earlier. Back then, he was still a builder, a climber, still human enough to be hungry. He leaned his head against the window and let the hum of the cabin pull him into memory. It was 2007, and the world was still naive about digital finance. A small team out of Estonia had created something radical: a blockchain-based payment protocol with built-in decentralized banking structures. A system where every user could function as a node, a bank, and a ledger all at once. It was brilliant. Too brilliant. Michael Harrow had been their angel investor. The money had come easy. He offered 10 times what they asked, wrapped in legal chains so subtle they never saw the trap. Within months, the core intellectual property had been transferred to a holding company in Delaware. And a week later, the team was locked out of their own servers. The startup died quietly. No lawsuit, no headlines, just a few desperate emails that Michael never answered. One of the developers, a man named Aaron Beckman, had even flown to New York, tried to confront him in the lobby of the Madison Avenue building where Harrow Global was headquartered. Michael never came down. Security escorted Aaron out. It was the last time he thought of him, until now. Michael shifted in his seat as the plane banked over the Alps. His reflection in the window looked thinner, older, not worn but peeled back. That technology he'd stolen in 2007? He never used it. He buried it. Buried it because it was too dangerous to let live. It would have made the centralized systems of traditional finance obsolete. It would have burned down his world. So he bought it, buried it, and rebranded himself as the visionary who led Harrow Global into a golden age of digital asset consolidation. He'd called it strategic containment, but maybe someone else had called it theft. As the plane descended toward Geneva, Michael's thoughts sharpened. This wasn't a hack. This wasn't a competitor. This was personal. Someone was digging up the past, and that meant they knew where to look. Geneva was gray and wet when he landed. He stepped out into the cold with only a coat, sunglasses, and a prepaid burner phone bought at the airport kiosk. The address he had memorized years ago still existed. A discreet private bank on the Rue de Rhône. No signs, just a name etched in small brass letters beside a stone archway. Inside, the air was all hushed wood and whispering leather. A private room was arranged. A terminal was brought in. The clerk typed without looking at Michael. Account number? Michael gave it. The clerk paused when the system beeped twice. Not a denial, a flag. Would you like to confirm your identity using the original protocol? Michael nodded. A biometric scan, a passphrase. He leaned in and whispered, "Only the dead have balanced books." The clerk stiffened almost imperceptibly, then entered the phrase. The screen unlocked. There it was again, $514.29. He transferred it instantly to a local cash card. No questions asked. The bank operated on discretion, not curiosity. Outside, the rain had picked up. Michael Harrow stood in the middle of a city that once welcomed him as a patron, now reduced to a man whose only currency was memory. But he had one thread now. One breadcrumb left behind. The shell company Orion Invest had been tied to the Estonian project, the one that died with Aaron Beckman's dreams. He needed to find who else had been part of that fall. He needed to find out who still remembered. And he needed to start in Paris. Paris was colder than he remembered. Not in temperature, though the wind cut through the alleys like it carried old grudges, but in presence. Michael Harrow had always experienced the city through the lens of money. Dinners with venture capitalists in Saint-Germain, secret meetings at the Hotel Coste. He'd once said in an interview that Paris was like a mistress who whispered your sins back to you in a language that made them sound romantic. Now she just looked tired. Michael stood across the street from a narrow cafe in the 11th arrondissement. A pale green awning drooped over the sidewalk. Inside, the espresso machine hissed like it was angry. Through the glass, he saw her, Eva Laurent, once a rising engineer in Tallinn's startup scene. Back in 2006, she'd been just 22, sharp, fearless, and idealistic. Michael had only met her twice in person before the acquisition. The second time, she refused to shake his hand. Now she wore a faded black apron and tied her hair back with a pencil. She didn't look up when he entered. She served 2 customers, cleared a tray, and only then turned to him with eyes that hadn't aged so much as hardened. "I won't make your coffee," she said in French. Michael didn't smile. He hadn't planned to. "I'm not here for coffee." She looked past him. No one else in the cafe, no camera crew, no entourage. Just the man who had cut the legs off her future and then vanished into his empire. "What do you want?" she asked flatly. "I need information," he said. "I need to understand what's happening." Ava let out a quiet laugh, like someone who had finally gotten a joke 10 years too late. "You're asking for help." "I'm asking for clarity," he corrected. "You should ask a priest." He stepped forward. She didn't move. "Someone has erased me, Ava. My accounts, my systems, my protections. Gone. They're not trying to kill me. They're trying to dismantle me, and they're doing it with knowledge of things that no one should remember. Not unless they were there." Ava leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Maybe it's justice," she said. Michael looked at her more carefully. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't sad. She was something colder than either. Resigned, a veteran of defeat. "You weren't the only one," he said. "I know that now. But whoever's doing this isn't going after corporations. They're coming after me. Personally, intimately. It's surgical." "Then maybe they know you better than you think," she replied. "I need a name." She shook her head. "You already had all the names, back then. We were people to you once, remember? Then we became entries in a ledger." Michael didn't flinch, but something in his expression cracked just a little. Eva walked to the espresso machine, poured a shot, then poured it down the sink. "You want a clue?" she asked. Michael nodded once. She leaned in, her voice so quiet he had to concentrate. "Check the ledger. There's more than one kind of balance." Then she looked away. He waited, but she offered nothing else. That night he checked into a cheap boutique hotel near Canal Saint-Martin. The kind of place with too many keys behind the counter, and a faint mildew smell in the elevator. He laid on the stiff mattress, coat still on, mind spinning. He thought about her words. More than one kind of balance. Emotional, moral, personal. The lights in the hallway clicked off at midnight. The city outside blinked and buzzed like it always had. Michael didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and replayed the last few days over and over like a broken algorithm. In the morning, she was gone. He returned to the cafe. Closed, no sign of her. He asked a man sweeping the curb, "La fille, Eva Laurent?" The man shrugged. "She left last night, said it was her last shift." Michael checked her social accounts. All gone. No email trails, no forwarding address. He stood on the street for a long time. The sky above Paris had turned slate gray, like it was waiting for something to happen. Back in the hotel room, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat to pull out his wallet, and stopped. There was something else there. A photograph. Small, matte, not new. A teenage boy, maybe 17, standing in front of a red brick building. Above him, a banner in Czech, Kodovací Akademie Praha. Michael stared at the photo. He didn't put it there. He hadn't seen it before. The boy had a quiet defiance in his stance, a sharpness behind the eyes. And in that moment, Michael Harrow understood that the game had changed. He was no longer just being dismantled, he was being led. Zurich smelled like clean paper and polished stone. Even the rain here seemed disinfected. Michael Harrow walked along Bahnhofstrasse with his collar turned up, coat heavy from the drizzle. He moved without hesitation, feet finding the route by muscle memory. He'd been coming here for nearly 2 decades, but never like this. Never on foot, never without warning, never without power. The private bank sat discreetly behind a wrought iron gate. No signage, just a frosted glass door and a camera hidden in the corner. He pressed the buzzer, a pause, then a soft click. Inside, the air was clinical and expensive. A woman in a slate gray suit greeted him without warmth. Her eyes lingered on his coat, damp, slightly wrinkled. Not the Harrow she remembered. "I'm here about an Orion Invest ledger," he said. "Code clearance, Cobalt 7. Authorization string, Delta Echo 3. Her brow twitched slightly. She nodded once and led him down a hall of oak panels and thick carpets to a smaller room in the back. One used for legacy clients. A faint trace of tobacco clung to the air. He waited 5 minutes, then 10. The door opened and an older man entered, white-haired with the slow, deliberate pace of someone not easily impressed. Michael recognized him immediately. "Ernst," he said. The man nodded. No handshake. "You shouldn't be here," Ernst said. "I know. You shouldn't need to be here. I know that too." Ernst sat across from him and set a black file folder on the table. "This isn't protocol. What you're asking, if I grant you access, even read-only, it creates a digital signature. This ledger was marked dormant in 2008. I'll need your biometric and one of the original passphrases." Michael looked him in the eye. "Only the dead have balanced books." Ernst blinked once, entered the phrase, then reached into a small terminal on the desk and placed Michael's index finger on a sensor. A green light flashed. The screen came to life. It was all there. Orion Invest, registered in 2006, officially dissolved in 2008. One of his earliest shell companies, the one he'd used to hold the stolen IP from the Estonian fintech team. It had been wrapped in 3 layers of separation, meant to expire into nothing, its assets quietly absorbed into a blind trust. But it wasn't dead. Transaction logs flickered on the screen. Timestamps. 2 months ago, 4 weeks ago, 5 days ago. Small wire transfers. Unusual destinations. A few hundred euros. Sometimes a few thousand. All routed through crypto conversion layers, then withdrawn as physical cash. Michael leaned in. The system listed a new account operator, Aaron Beckman. Michael's chest tightened, not from surprise but recognition. That name hadn't crossed his mind in years, not since the day security walked him out of the Madison Avenue lobby. Aaron had been the heart of that team, the visionary behind the decentralized banking model. Quiet, driven, loyal to his engineers. naive. Michael had offered him a way out after the acquisition, a soft landing, a high-paying research position in Palo Alto. Aaron refused, said it was blood money. Michael never saw him again. He stared at the name on the screen. "This isn't possible," he said. "He's dead." Ernst looked at him. "Not according to the system." Michael scrolled further. The latest transaction, a wire of $1,000, was directed to a name that jumped out at him with electric clarity. Jacob Beckman. Michael sat back in the chair. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. He remembered the photo from his coat pocket, the teenage boy in front of the coding academy, the sharp eyes, the confidence. He had assumed it was someone new, a proxy, a puppet, but it wasn't. It was Jakob, Aaron Beckman's son. The pieces aligned so cleanly it made Michael's stomach turn. Jakob would have been maybe 9 or 10 when his father lost everything. He would have grown up hearing how his father's life's work had been stolen, how their future was gutted and left behind. Michael could picture it. Late-night arguments, unpaid bills, promises that turned to dust. And now that boy was a man with enough skill, enough time, and enough fury to tear apart Michael Harrow's empire from the inside out. This wasn't just revenge, this was inheritance. Michael leaned forward. "Can you trace the origin of these transactions?" Ernst shook his head. "They were routed through anonymized crypto pools. Sophisticated. Someone very smart built this trail." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. He felt it. Not fear, not exactly. Something older. Something more ancient. The realization that the past doesn't stay buried. That people don't stay ruined. Sometimes they evolve. Sometimes they sharpen. And sometimes they come back to collect. He opened his eyes. "I need a flight to Prague." Ernst said nothing. Just stood and left the room. Michael remained seated, staring at the final line on the screen. Access log. Authorized user. Beckman Jakob timestamp. 03:12 CET, 2 days ago. He had been here, inside this bank, sitting in this very chair, watching the same ledger, balancing the same books. Prague was dressed in fog, the kind that swallowed sound and softened the edges of buildings, like they were memories instead of structures. Michael Harrow stood outside the gates of the old coding academy just after sunrise. Collar turned up, the photograph from Paris gripped tightly in his gloved hand. The building had been shuttered years ago. Windows cracked, paint peeling. The banner in the photo, Kodovací Academy Praha, was still faintly visible beneath layers of dust and graffiti. A rusted lock held the gate shut. Through the bars he could see the courtyard where the boy had stood. Jakob Beckman, no more than 17 in the picture, but the ledger said he was 21 now. And smart, dangerous, smart. Smart enough to outmaneuver billion-dollar security systems and unravel an empire from a laptop. Michael walked the perimeter, looking for a path. None. The building was a dead end. A breadcrumb turned to ash. He turned away. He spent the next 2 days in Prague moving like a shadow. No hotels under his name, no digital trail. He paid cash for everything. He followed rumors. A student from the academy remembered Jakob speaking at a hackathon. A bartender remembered him renting out a back room once for a crypto thing. A building manager remembered him subletting a studio with fiber optic internet installed at his own expense. Then finally a name, Hostivar, a decaying industrial district on the edge of the city. An old printing warehouse had been turned into a hacker hostel, half startup incubator, half squat. Michael arrived just before nightfall. The place looked abandoned. He walked around the side toward a dim alley lit only by the flicker of a broken street lamp. His steps echoed on wet cobblestone. Then he heard it. Footsteps behind him. Close. Quick. He turned too late. A hard shove to the back knocked him against the alley wall. He twisted, raised an elbow, but 2 figures closed in, faces hidden by scarves, hands reaching. One grabbed his coat, another pulled at his shoulder bag. Michael fought back. Years of comfort hadn't dulled all his instincts, but he was outnumbered and older. A fist struck his temple. He staggered, slipped, hit the ground hard. then shouting. A new voice, younger, urgent. Check, rapid fire. One of the attackers fell. Another yelled and bolted. Michael looked up in a daze. One of the muggers lay crumpled beside the dumpster, groaning. The other had vanished into the dark. And standing over him, hoodie up, eyes fierce, was the boy from the photo. Jakob Beckman. Michael sat up slowly, breath ragged, head pounding. You okay? Jakob asked. His English was sharp, low. Michael blinked. You're... I know who I am. Jakob held out a hand. Michael hesitated, then took it. The grip was strong, measured. Jakob pulled him to his feet, then looked over his shoulder, making sure the alley was clear. You shouldn't be here, he said. Michael steadied himself against the wall. I needed to find you. Jakob snorted. Yeah, that's the problem. They walked in silence until Jakob led him to a side door, unlocking it with a key card that blinked green. Inside was a narrow stairwell, badly lit. They climbed to a loft room, cold, spare, walls lined with wires and screens and a battered couch. Jakob tossed Michael a water bottle. Michael took it without a word. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Then Michael said, You're the one who did it. Jakob didn't answer. He sat at the edge of the desk, arms crossed. I know you emptied my accounts, Michael continued. I know about Zurich, Orion Invest, the photo, the trail you left. You wanted me to find you. No, Jakob said. I wanted to watch you look. Michael studied him. You're not doing this for money. Jakob shook his head. You're not doing this just for revenge either. A pause. Then Jakob's jaw tightened. This isn't just about you and my father. Michael felt a flicker in his chest. Then what is it? Jakob stood and crossed to the window, looking out at the Prague skyline, copper domes lost in the mist. You didn't just kill a company, he said quietly. You killed an idea. My father wasn't the only one. There were others, investors, engineers, people who believed in what they were building. You didn't outplay them. You didn't outsmart them. You buried them. I made a business decision, Michael said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Jakob turned, eyes cold. You made a choice, and that choice ruined people. You walked away, bought your silence with their future. Michael didn't look away. And this is justice? No, Jakob said. This is accounting. The words landed with surgical precision. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You've made your point, he said. Jakob raised an eyebrow. You think this is over? Michael stood slowly. You're smart, I see that. But this kind of thing, it burns both ways. You can't dismantle someone like me and walk away untouched. Jakob shrugged. I'm not walking away. He crossed the room and picked something up off the desk, a piece of paper. He handed it to Michael. It was a list. Names. 12, maybe more. Some crossed out, some not. These, Jakob said, are the families your decisions touched. Not all of them want peace. Some want blood. Michael looked at the paper. One name at the bottom caught his eye. Alyssa Harrow. His wife. His voice dropped. What does she have to do with this? Jakob didn't answer. Michael looked up sharply. Jakob's expression didn't change. We're not finished, he said. Not even close. Then he walked to the door, opened it. You should leave before they realize you're still breathing. Michael stepped out into the hallway, the paper still in his hand. Behind him, the door closed with a quiet click. And in the silence, Michael understood something he hadn't before. This wasn't just a vendetta, it was a reckoning. Berlin was colder than Prague, but not in temperature, in intention. The city had always carried a quiet, permanent sense of division, even long after the wall came down. Michael Harrow felt it as he stepped out of the Hauptbahnhof, the strange contrast of ultra-modern glass towers rising beside graffiti-stained concrete. Berlin didn't care who you were, it just watched. Jakob Beckman walked 10 steps ahead, hood up, hands buried in the pockets of his coat. He hadn't spoken much since Prague, not beyond clip logistics. Michael didn't push. He knew better than to prod someone already at war with the past. They moved through the city like ghosts, cafes, tech hubs, anonymous buildings marked only by numbers. Jakob's contacts were smart and careful, mostly whispers from forums and encrypted threads, the kind of people who read white papers for sport and lived off the grid for philosophy. They started assembling names. Michael had seen some of them before. Investors burned by ventures that were drained and dissolved under shell corporations. Engineers who'd been lured with buyout promises only to be cut loose before their stock vested. Lawyers who were paid to write the terms that buried others. Names he had forgotten. People he had never met in person. But someone had remembered them all. Every one of them had been contacted, organized, and some of them had been funded. "That's the part I don't get," Jakob said one evening in a rooftop apartment overlooking Kreuzberg. "It's not just one person. This isn't some angry Reddit thread. It's structured, coordinated, and someone put up real money to make it move." Michael paced the room, staring out at the Spree River in the distance. His mind wasn't on the names anymore. It was on the accounts, the ones that had vanished, the ones that were only ever accessed by two people, himself and Alyssa Harrow, his wife. He hadn't spoken to her in over a year, not since she left the board. Officially, she was living in Singapore, managing an Asia-based philanthropic venture. But the last ping from her satellite number had come from Berlin. He turned to Jakob. "I think I know who funded it." Jakob didn't react. "Who?" "My wife." Jakob looked at him for a long time. "Your wife helped erase you?" "She's the only one who could have accessed the internal ledgers. She managed my blind trusts. She knew every layer of the network. She set them up." Jakob leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "Funny," he said. "When we pulled records on Orion Invest, guess who filed the dissolution order?" Michael didn't answer. Jakob continued. "Alyssa Harrow, 2008, digitally signed." Michael's breath caught, just for a second. He pulled out his phone, one of the last remaining encrypted lines he could trust, and triggered a dormant trace on her last known financial ping, a small wire transfer to a German clinic. Jakob looked over his shoulder. "That's Tiergarten." They were in a cab 10 minutes later. The clinic was tucked into a quiet street, a refurbished brownstone building with ivy covering the windows, and the smell of antiseptic trailing out into the cold air. Inside, the nurse at the front desk looked up with polite disinterest. Michael leaned in. "Alyssa Harrow," he said. "We're here to see her." The nurse hesitated. "I'm sorry, she doesn't receive visitors." Michael held up a photo, one of the few personal ones he had left. The two of them, years ago, smiling over champagne. The nurse's eyes softened slightly. One moment, they waited. Long enough for the cold in Michael's chest to turn from suspicion to something else. Something like dread. Then the nurse returned. "She's in room 3, down the hall." Jakob stayed behind as Michael walked the corridor, boots echoing off tiled floors. His heart beat louder than his steps. Room 3 was warm, quiet, a private suite. And there she was, Alyssa Harrow. Her hair was shorter now, her face a little thinner, but her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, were the same. She looked up from the tablet in her hands and gave a small smile. "Michael," she said softly, "took you long enough." He closed the door behind him. "You knew," he said. She nodded. "You helped them." "Yes." "Why?" She set the tablet down gently. "Because you stopped listening to me 15 years ago. Because you turned trust into leverage. Because you buried people who believed in something. And because one day I woke up next to a man I didn't recognize anymore." Michael didn't move. "You could have walked away," he said. "You didn't have to burn it all down." She tilted her head. "I didn't. Jakob did the burning. I just showed him where the matches were." Michael's voice was quieter now. "You betrayed me." Alyssa stood slowly, walked toward him, and stopped just out of reach. "No, Michael. I balanced you." He looked at her, at the woman who had once built his world with him, and now stood calmly as it collapsed. "Where is Aaron Beckman?" he asked. Her gaze shifted. "I don't know," she said. "I thought he was dead." "He's not." She took that in, her expression unreadable. "I don't know where he is," she said again, "but I think Jakob does." Michael turned to leave. Michael, she called after him. He stopped at the door. She said it quietly, almost gently. They're not just trying to destroy you. They're trying to rewrite you from the outside in. He said nothing and walked out. Jakob waited by the elevator. When he saw Michael's face, he didn't need to ask. Was she part of it? Michael nodded. She was the architect. Jakob looked at him, for the first time, not with anger, but with something closer to pity. Then you're not the only one who's lost everything. And for once, Michael Harrow had no reply. Michael Harrow stood on the balcony of the borrowed flat in Friedrichshain, staring out across the rusted rooftops of Berlin. The city below flickered in neon and shadow, trains whispering along their elevated tracks, horns echoing from far-off intersections. He hadn't said a word since leaving the clinic. Not to Jakob, not to himself. Inside, Jakob scrolled silently through encrypted messages on an old laptop. Every now and then, he glanced toward Michael, but said nothing. They both knew the space was necessary. Some truths once spoken couldn't be folded back into silence. She had built the empire with him. Alyssa Harrow had structured the offshore trusts, managed the phantom accounts, constructed the scaffolding of secrecy that made his fortune untouchable. And then 2 years ago, she had started dismantling it, quietly, methodically, while he slept beside her, unaware. Michael stepped back into the apartment and closed the door behind him. She knew everything, he said finally. She read through the old contracts, the acquisition documents, found the original IP filings from the Estonian startup. Jakob looked up. And she traced it all back to me. Every decision, every cut corner, every shell company. She found the truth under the PR. Jakob's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. She said I stopped listening to her 15 years ago. That sounds like the only part you didn't try to deny. Michael sat down slowly in the worn leather chair across from him. She believed your father was dead. Jakob closed the laptop. She believed wrong. Michael looked up sharply. What are you talking about? Jakob stood, walked to the kitchen, poured himself water, then leaned against the counter. He didn't die in 2009, he said. He disappeared. Michael shook his head. That's impossible. There was a report, a body, a police investigation. Jakob's voice was quiet but steady. There was a staged suicide, an empty car by a bridge, a note, no body. Michael stared at him, speechless. He faked it, Jakob continued. Walked away from everything. From me, from the world. Because he thought that was the only way to survive what you did. Michael felt the weight of it sink in. Not just guilt, but something worse. A sense of being hunted by a ghost he had already mourned. How do you know? He asked. Jakob's eyes darkened. Because he contacted me last year. Michael sat upright. What? He sent me a drive, Jakob said. Encrypted, full of ledgers, names, files. Every scrap of your empire that he had tracked. He'd been watching you, Michael. Not just from the outside, inside too. Hired analysts, whistleblowers. He knew everything, even things you'd forgotten. Michael swallowed hard. He's alive, and he's behind this. Jakob hesitated, then nodded. I thought this was mine, that I was leading the charge. But now, I think I've only been playing the role he wrote for me. He started this. He lit the match. I just kept feeding the fire. Michael leaned forward, hands clenched together. Where is he now? Jakob's face was unreadable. I don't know. He stopped responding 6 months ago. Maybe he's gone again. Maybe not. Michael stood, started pacing. This changes everything. No, Jakob said. It confirms everything. Michael turned to him. He's been watching me since I took the code? Jakob nodded. Since the day you signed the acquisition papers. He never stopped. Michael looked away, the memory rising uninvited. Aaron Beckman in that lobby, looking up as security pulled him away. No rage, just something quieter, something colder, a man not broken, but recalibrating. Jakob stepped closer. You think this is just about you losing your money? Your legacy? It's not. Michael said nothing. Jakob's voice dropped. You're not being punished, "You're being replaced." The words hit with surgical precision. Michael turned slowly, the weight of the realization finally pressing in from all sides. Everything he had built was being dismantled, not just to hurt him, but to make room for something else. A better version, a cleaner model, a world without him. Jakub walked back to the desk, reopened the laptop, pulled up a string of surveillance footage, dated, time-stamped, traced through Berlin and Prague and Geneva. Images of Michael, of meetings, conversations, moments he didn't remember being watched. "He's been 10 steps ahead this whole time," Jakub said. "You weren't paranoid enough." Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. "What does he want?" Jakub looked him in the eyes. "I don't know, but I don't think it's revenge." Michael's heart thudded once, slow and deep. "Then what is it?" Jakub didn't answer. He just turned the laptop screen toward him. A paused video feed, low-res, grainy, a still image of a man in a coat, half his face visible as he exited a tram in Vienna. Gray hair, a limp, but unmistakable. Aaron Beckman. Michael stared at the image, the silence stretching long between them. The ghost had a face again, and it was watching. Munich was bright and clinical, all glass edges and polished transit systems, but beneath its order pulsed something jagged. Michael Harrow felt it the moment the train pulled into Hauptbahnhof. Not fear, he was too used to danger to be afraid, but exposure. Someone was watching, and that someone was done hiding. He and Jakub Beckman moved through the city like two magnets trying not to touch. Their truce was fragile now, held together only by urgency. Aaron Beckman wasn't just alive. He was pulling strings from the shadows, and Munich was his next move. It started small. The television in Michael's hotel room flickered on in the middle of the night. No channels, just static. Then a burst of audio, his voice from a 2011 board meeting he thought was never recorded. The next day, his email app blinked awake with a message from a blank address. No subject, just an image. A photo of Michael in the Berlin clinic hallway, talking to Alyssa Harrow. The angle was impossible, intimate, someone had been there, close. Then came the footage, a looped clip sent via encrypted link. Michael, 2 days earlier, at a cafe in Kreuzberg, reaching for a coffee. The camera angle was from inside the shop's register. The timestamp blinked in red. Live feed archived. Access. Aaron B. Jakub slammed his laptop shut after seeing it. "He's toying with you." Michael nodded, jaw tight. "He wants me to follow. He wants you to snap." They traced the IP pings, hopelessly fragmented. Aaron had used a string of dead relays that moved through Norway, then Latvia, then Belgium, before returning full circle to Munich. Then a message appeared, not an email, not a file. On the mirror in Michael's hotel bathroom, written in steam, Sabener Strasse 41, Box 210. A storage facility, no lock, no passcode, just a number. Jakub didn't like it. "It's a trap." Michael stared at the message. "Of course it is." Still, he went. The facility was anonymous, industrial, unassuming. Row after row of boxes, metal doors, keypads. Box 210 sat in the middle, tucked between a rusting ladder and a broken vending machine. The number was scratched but visible. Inside on a shelf was a sealed fireproof briefcase. No booby trap, no alarms, just weight. Michael opened it with shaking hands. It wasn't money, it was worse. Dozens of pages, meticulously ordered. Printed spreadsheets, handwritten annotations, copies of wire transfers, legal contracts, proxy signatories, dummy boards, email transcripts, IP logs. Every deception Michael had ever orchestrated, every bribe, every betrayal, every theft. He sat on the metal bench beside the box and began reading. The handwriting, elegant, precise, was unmistakable. Aaron Beckman had documented everything, and not just the facts, the why, the when, the choices that weren't necessary but convenient. Notes in the margins questioned Michael's motives. Underlined sentences asked the questions Michael never had to answer. Was this worth a child's future? Did she know what you did with her code? What part of yourself did you kill first? There was a letter at the bottom, folded, thick paper, heavy with intention. Michael opened it. His name was written across the top in ink, as if it were a eulogy. Michael, you always believed you were the smartest man in the room. That's what made you dangerous. Not your intelligence, but your certainty. You didn't just steal our work. You stole time, futures, names. We disappeared so you could rise. And now you are watching your legacy unravel. Not because I hate you, not because I want your money, I want something else. I want you to understand what it feels like to live with the silence you gave us. I want you to see the machine you built without believing you were above it. I want you to know that none of this was inevitable. I don't need revenge. I need you to see. And when you do, when you finally understand, maybe you'll have something worth writing down too. Aaron Michael closed the letter slowly, hands trembling. Jakob was standing near the door, watching him. Is that it? Jakob asked. No, Michael said quietly. It's the beginning. He left the box where it was, carried only the letter. As they stepped out into the freezing Munich air, Michael finally understood what Aaron Beckman wanted. Not his money, not his death, his awareness. Aaron wasn't destroying Michael Harrow. He was showing Michael Harrow who he had always been. The train to Vienna carved through dark countryside like a scalpel. The windows reflected only shadows. Michael Harrow sat in silence, the letter from Aaron Beckman resting on his lap. Jakob Beckman sat across from him, arms folded, eyes closed, not asleep, just removed. Neither of them spoke. The coordinates had arrived the night before. No signature, no message. Just a location, a time, and a single word, settle. The address led to an old banking hall in Vienna's first district, abandoned since 2009. Beneath the city's gilded facades and opera houses, its basement vaults were now husks of a financial empire that had collapsed under its own secrecy. The entrance was locked with a manual code panel, no electronics. Jakob cracked it in under 3 minutes. They descended into cold, silent tunnels lit only by emergency lights humming faintly in the dark. At the end of the hallway, an old steel door stood half open, heavy, impenetrable once shut. Inside, the vault was hollowed out. No gold, no cash, just old filing cabinets and dust, and a chair in the center, occupied. Michael stopped in the doorway. Aaron Beckman sat still, pale hands folded in his lap. His face was older, weathered, and marred by deep scarring that cut from his left temple to his jaw. His eyes, though, his eyes were unchanged, still sharp, still searching. Michael didn't move, neither did Iran. Jakob stepped in slowly, flanking Michael. His breathing was uneven. Iran spoke first. Michael, the voice was quiet. Rougher than memory, but unmistakably alive. Michael stepped forward. I thought you were dead. Aaron tilted his head slightly. You were supposed to. Jakob said nothing. His eyes stayed locked on his father, trying to read him like a stranger. Michael walked into the room fully now, each step echoing against the steel walls. Why? He asked. All of this. Why now? Aaron didn't blink. Because you needed to feel what you made us feel. To be erased, disconnected, powerless. You climbed by making others invisible. I wanted to hold a mirror. Michael looked down at the floor, then back at Iran. And when I saw it? He asked. Then what? Iran leaned forward slightly. Then you'd know it was never about revenge. Michael stared at him. Iran's voice dropped. It was about recognition. You didn't just take code, Michael. You took futures, families. You collapsed lives like line items. You buried people beneath the paperwork. And when they screamed, you called it business. Michael didn't deny it. I know that now, he said quietly. Aaron nodded. That's why I brought you here. Not to destroy you, but to let you understand the weight of what you built. To feel it crush you. Silence. Then Jakob stepped forward. He pulled something from his coat. A gun. Aaron turned his head slowly, calmly toward his son. Michael's heart seized in his chest. Jakob spoke, voice shaking. "He deserves more than a lecture, Father." Aaron didn't flinch. "Put it down." Jakob didn't move. "He walked away from everything, and you just want to let him see? That's not justice. That's a performance." Michael took a step back. "Jakob, shut up." Jakob's voice cracked. "You think one apology erases what you did to my father? To me? You turned our future into a ghost story." He aimed the gun directly at Michael's chest. Aaron stood. The tension in the vault crystallized. "Jakob," he said softly but firmly, "don't do this. He ruined you." "No," Aaron said. "He made a choice, and now he has to live with it." Jakob's hands trembled. His face was flushed, eyes wild with a decade of unsaid things. "I lived in silence for years, watching you disappear, watching him thrive. And now you want peace?" Aaron stepped between them. "Jakob, this ends here, or it never ends." Michael looked at Jakob's hands, at the weight he held. He knew what it felt like to want the world to pay, to want to burn it all to prove a point. He took a breath. "I'm sorry," he said. Jakob looked at him, rage flickering. "That's it?" "No," Michael said. "It's not even close. I've built my life on control, on making sure no one could hurt me. That ended the day you took it away. You didn't just dismantle me, you showed me what I became." His voice broke, just slightly. "And it disgusts me." Jakob didn't lower the gun, but he didn't fire. His breath slowed. Aaron stepped closer, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Jakob flinched. But then, after a long pause, he let the gun fall to his side. He turned away. No one spoke for a long time. Then Aaron looked at Michael. "This is your ledger now. What you do with it is yours." Michael nodded quietly. He turned to leave. Before he stepped through the vault door, he looked back at the father and son, fractured, broken, and still standing. And for the first time, Michael Harrow felt the truth not as judgment, but as inheritance, the kind he'd never earned. London was quiet in the early hours, the kind of gray stillness that made the whole city feel like it had forgotten to wake up. Rain painted the streets with long silver streaks, and the Thames moved like something ancient beneath the bridges. Michael Harrow sat on a bench near Blackfriars, a takeaway coffee cooling in his hands. He wore a second-hand coat, no watch, no phone, no entourage, no trace. He hadn't used his name in weeks. To the world, Michael Harrow was gone, officially deceased in a financial plane crash of his own design. No headlines, no trial, just a whisper and then silence. He'd moved through the past few months like a ghost, renting rooms under false names, taking trains with cash, watching the world he once ruled adjust to his absence without missing a step. No one came looking for him, not one. He worked now, odd jobs, loading boxes, fixing printers. He didn't talk much, people didn't ask, but he watched. He saw Jakob Beckman on the news 2 weeks ago, a small feature, buried in the tech segment, about a new decentralized finance platform built around transparency and access, built from the bones of the original Estonian project, the one Michael had buried in 2007. Jakob hadn't used his father's name, not publicly, but Michael recognized the codebase, recognized the architecture. It was brilliant, and it was free to use. The platform was called Reclaim. Michael smiled when he saw it, not pride, not envy, something quieter, something like surrender. He finished his coffee and stood. The wind picked up near the bridge, sharp against his collar. He began to walk home, an attic flat above a bookstore in Zurich. He had learned to enjoy the creaks in the floor, the leak in the ceiling. They reminded him that nothing was permanent, not even the worst version of yourself. When he reached the door, he saw the package. No return address, just his name, Michael, written in handwriting he hadn't seen since Munich. He carried it inside, sat at the small kitchen table, and opened it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, blank, unmarked. The pages crisp and heavy. Beside it, a black pen, weighted, familiar. And beneath both, a single note. Balance it yourself. Michael stared at the note for a long time. He ran his fingers across the spine of the ledger. The weight of it felt deliberate, symbolic, punishing, or maybe freeing. He opened to the first page. Blank. He looked at the pen. Then slowly, he uncapped it. He didn't write anything. Not yet. Outside, the rain thickened, tapping gently against the window like a clock. Michael sat there. Still, the ledger opened before him. A man no longer erased, but not yet accounted for. And in that space, in that pause between destruction and redemption, he finally understood. The real debt had never been financial, and the real balance was still unwritten.